This presentation is on the history of mental asylums, with the focus being on Blackwell's Island Asylum. It is going to provide information on the background, history, population, and architectural design of the asylum. Here we have some information about how the lunatic asylum was essentially formed. In 1825, the insane in New York City were moved to the basement of the General Hospital on Blackwell's Island. Here, they were treated poorly and remained in treacherous conditions. Because of these conditions and the overpopulation rate, the island was approved in 1834 to build a separate institution for the mentally ill. The lunatic asylum was opened in 1841. Some history about the island was that it was opened in 1839 and contained 147 acres of land. It was strangely located in the middle of the East River in New York City between Manhattan and Queens, which was accessible by ferry, and that you can see in the photo. This island was originally named after Robert Blackwell, whose descendants actually owned the land before it was purchased by the city of New York in 1828. The main building, being the mental hospital, was opened in 1832 along with the island penitentiary. The population at the mental hospital did not start out being extremely large. In 1840, the population stood at approximately 278, rising to about 1,300 in 1870. The population at Blackwell's institution was far more than any other hospital at the time, and to make matters worse, there were no improvements in the hospital's conditions, even with the spike in population. This left approximately 400 people sleeping on the floors at one time. For this reason, the press became highly fascinated with the asylum. Local newspapers, including the New York Times and Harper's Weekly, would provide weekly run-ins with the asylum patients that were the most intriguing. Now I'm going to be providing you some background information regarding the lunatic asylum. It was located in New York City and was known as the first lunatic asylum in the country. There were also more than one building located on the island, which included workhouses, a prison, offices, and the hospital. They say the reason the island came about was due to urbanization, immigration, and industrialization. People were threatened by the immigrants taking their job and being around them in general because they thought they were trouble. Therefore, they sent them to Blackwell's Island. Also, there were outbreaks of smallpox within New York City, so people thought the best thing to do was to isolate those who were contagious. One of the intriguing patients at Blackwell's Asylum was famously known as Mrs. Buchanan. She was in the incurable section of the asylum because she would have delusions that she was the wife of the president and would utter her marital duties to anyone who wanted to listen. She would say that she bears a large family to the president, but the fact was that she was speaking about her cats. That is why she gained a lot of press and retained a celebrity-like status within the asylum. The designer of the buildings was Alexander Jackson Davis. The architecture of the asylum was shaped like a C. The reason for this was to create enclosed courts which met either side of the river. The buildings, as you can see, were approximately 3 stories high and were eventually separated by gender. By 1866, the hospital had grown to several buildings, 3 of which held patients. These were the asylum, in the original building, the lodge, otherwise known as the madhouse, and the retreat. There was also an octagon located, which was like a office for the staff. Now, by the 1860s, the average population was approximately 800 patients. Later, this number skyrocketed, surging to somewhere around 1,700 patients. This was nearly twice the amount of the design population size that should be accommodated at one time. Hence, why there was around 340 deaths per year due to the lack of care of patients and also the lack of staff, which you can see was only about 56 employees at a time. To conclude, Blackwell's Lunatic Asylum eventually closed in 1894, and the patients that remained were relocated to Ward's Island that was nearby. The remaining patients were looked after by the Metropolitan Hospital staff. In 1968, the island began to transform into residential areas. In 1971, Blackwell's Island was renamed Roosevelt Island after Franklin D. Roosevelt. The population on the island today is approximately 12,000 people. So if you're interested by this and ever make it to New York City, buildings from the 1800s still exist today on the island. And these are the resources I used to find my information about Blackwell's Island and the Lunatic Asylum. And the images you saw were from these resources.